Paul Revere, the Midnight Rider, was being held captive by a British patrol about a half-mile from here on Lexington Green in the pre-dawn hours of April 19th, 1775. When suddenly, one of the British officers holding him captive turned to his sergeant and asked, "Is your horse tired?" That right there, that strange question, is the first hint that these British officers who had seized Revere and held him at gunpoint were thinking of letting him go and getting out of Lexington themselves. Paul Revere was not the only American who had been rounded up by this British patrol on that fateful night. The British officers had also captured 3 young men from Lexington who had set out on horseback a little bit earlier in the night in order to determine what those British officers were up to. And their names were Elijah Sanderson, Solomon Brown, and Jonathan Loring. As this group, the British officers and their unwilling captives, approach Lexington Green here, they hear a gunshot. And Revere notices it clearly rattles the British officers. And Major Edward Mitchell, who is in command of the British patrol, who you might remember from our last video on Paul Revere's capture, says to Revere, "What was that for?" And Revere says, "To alarm the country." Hi everybody, it's me, Katie. Welcome back to my channel where it is all Revolutionary War all the time. And on this channel, we venture out on historical action adventures and visit places where events of the American Revolution actually happened, like today on Lexington Green. So if this sounds like fun to you, then I hope you'll don a pair of action adventure pants, hit subscribe, and come along. And by the way, this rock, since I'm here, I'll just tell you, this kind of symbolizes about where the line of Lexington militiamen stood on the morning of April 19th, which sparked the battles of Lexington and Concord, the first day of the American Revolution. So about from here, the militiamen were sort of arrayed here on Lexington Green at about this place on the green itself. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. Now, back to the video. So as they approach Lexington Green, they come down this very road right here from the Lincoln area, a couple miles outside Lexington, where Revere and the 3 Lexington men, and also a one-handed peddler named Allen, who was with them that night, where they had all been rounded up. So as they're approaching and coming closer to Lexington, they realize that the town is alive with activity. It has been alarmed and it is awake. And one of the Lexington men, upon hearing this shot, 25-year-old Jonathan Loring, says to the British officers, "The bell's ringing, the town is alarmed, and you're all dead men." The British officers halted. The bell on the town common is ringing, and this is where the bell stood here on Lexington Green in 1775. This is the monument to the old belfry where the bell originally stood. So this bell was ringing, and it's about 2:30, 3:30 in the morning, the early morning hours of April 19th, and the militia has been roused, and they're gathering at Buckman Tavern across the way. So the patrol and the prisoners were coming down this very road, and upon hearing the shots from the green, they halted. Major Edward Mitchell orders his men to cut the bridles and the girths off of the horses. I didn't know what a girth was. It's the belt that holds the saddle on to the horse. Major Mitchell orders the bridles and the girths be cut off the horses that the 3 Lexington men were riding. And he drives the horses away. And he lets Elijah Sanderson, Solomon Brown, and Jonathan Loring go. He releases them. But he does not release Paul Revere. Now, this British patrol, by the way, is only comprised of about 9 or 10 men. They are not connected at this moment to the main body of British troops. They're miles apart. The main body of British troops on the expedition are headed this way. They're coming from the east, from Boston, headed west, passing through Lexington to reach Concord. But they are not here yet. They're probably still in Cambridge. So the patrol is approaching Lexington Green from the west, from the Lincoln area, coming down this road in an effort to meet up with the main body of British troops approaching from the east, coming from Boston. But they realize that in order to meet up with the main body of British troops, about 700 British soldiers headed this way, they have to pass by Lexington Green in order to do it. Hence, they have a problem. Hi everybody, just jumping in really quick to say that if you're enjoying this video or if you learned something new, I hope you'll consider giving it a like or subscribing. And thank you so much to everyone who has already subscribed and liked my videos. I see it and I really appreciate it. I do have a website, it's allrevolutionarywar.com, and I have a sign up for if I ever send a newsletter or like any updates, which I haven't done yet, but I might in the future. So if you'd like to, you can go to allrevolutionarywar.com. And this, real quick, I just want to show you, this monument stands on Lexington Green. It was erected in 1799 to April 19th, 1775, to honor the memory of the men who fell here on that morning. And the remains of those men are interred here under the monument. Their remains were moved and they were reburied here. So the men who fell here on Lexington Green on the morning of April 19th are still here. So it's only Revere with the patrol at this point, and they arrive within eyeshot of Lexington Green. And this time they hear a volley of shots. And again, the British officers are visibly shaken by this. And Major Mitchell suddenly asks Revere, "How far is it to Cambridge? And is there any other road?" There is no other road. In order to rejoin the main body of British troops, they have to pass by Lexington Green. But how can they do it when the town bell is clanging, warning shots are being fired, and they're carrying, as a prisoner, Paul Revere. Then Major Mitchell turns to his sergeant and asks the question that started this whole video. Is your horse tired? And the sergeant says, yes. And this is the moment when Paul Revere's trusty steed that he had borrowed from the Larkin family in Charlestown at the very beginning of his midnight ride, which carried him through the whole countryside to Lexington here and almost all the way out to Concord, drops out of history. Major Mitchell tells Revere to dismount, and they cut the bridle and the girth off of the sergeant's horse and drive it away. The sergeant then gets on Revere's horse, our horse, America's horse, and they ride off, gallop away in an effort to rejoin the British without carrying Revere with them. So Revere is left standing alone on the dark road, and he decides that he has to get back to the Reverend Clark's house here in Lexington, where John Hancock and Samuel Adams still are. And he cuts through this very burying ground on his way there. And this burying ground was here in 1775, and it is absolutely bristling with headstones. But just to give you an idea of all of these gravestones that have been here since the 18th century, and many of which were probably here when Paul Revere was creeping through in the early morning hours of that fateful day, April 19th, 1775. And we're going to leave Paul Revere in this burying ground, but I hope you'll watch this video, which will give you, I think, a better sense of the sounds and noises of the night of April 19th that the British patrol and Revere heard as they approached Lexington Green. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one.